Hey, welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. I'm JR, and with me on this episode is Big Jeff, as we are going to talk through the 9-game SEC conference schedule that they have implemented on Thursday, August 21st. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Jeff. Jeff is going to kind of give you the details on it, and then we'll start talking through kind of what this means and what we can expect from these changes.
Yeah, pretty exciting for college football. Been talked about for a long time, tied to the debate about what the playoff formats in the future should look like. But announced today, the SEC will have a 9-game schedule. Tied to that, they'll continue to play without divisions. Each school will play 3 annual opponents focused on maintaining traditional rivalries. So, an example, I know Georgia and Auburn has always been a rivalry. They don't want to break that, right? So, 3 annual opponents will be the same every year. The remaining 6 games will rotate among the rest of the league opponents. And what that means is each team will face every other SEC program at least once every 2 years, and then every opponent home and away over 4 years. And then in addition, and this is pretty cool, JR, SEC teams are required to schedule at least one additional high-quality non-conference opponent from either the ACC, Big Ten, Big 12 conferences, or Notre Dame each season. So 9-game SEC schedule plus another quality, really Power 4 opponent or Notre Dame. And so really they're upping the ante, and I think it's tied to it was announced the decision to use enhanced strength of schedule metrics for the playoff committee. I think that was the impetus for the SEC to do this, and they were probably aware that that was coming. So I think this is good for college football. But JR, what are your thoughts? And importantly, how should the Big Ten respond to this move by the SEC?
Yeah, so the Big Ten here needs to realize that they got what they wanted, right? We have been screaming about the 8 conference game versus the 9 conference games, and even though the SEC fans failed to realize it because they said, well, look at these out of conference games we played, it was like, okay, but you still have one more guaranteed loss or win for half of your conference than the Big Ten does. So it just never really made sense. It was one of the reasons why I believe the Big Ten should have been vying for the automatic bids. I'm still not totally out on the automatic bids. I still think that there is some value in those happening. However, I am not opposed to more at-large spots now with this kind of even playing field conference games going together. And it sounds like the ACC is going to move in that same direction as well. There was some reporting on that after the SEC made this move. But what the Big Ten should be doing is the Big Ten should essentially be doing what the SEC is doing now, because the Big Ten was a step above the SEC, and this SEC met that, but then they also went higher as well. You're talking about some of the stuff on here that they've done that they are requiring them to play a Power 4. I've seen high quality. I don't know exactly what high quality means or high value means. Andy Staples seems to think that high quality, high value means Georgia Tech because they went to overtime with Georgia Tech last year. That is not a reason for a team to be high quality. They are 22-28 this past like three or 4 seasons. So I would not call that high quality personally, but whatever. The Big Ten does need to follow suit here at the very least with getting every single Big Ten team, having them have to play a Power 4 team out of conference, whether that's the Big 12, the ACC, the SEC. My preference would be a Big Ten SEC challenge. Maybe that comes to fruition this offseason or something like that. I kind of doubt it will, just because with how long it kind of takes to schedule out some of these games. But the Big Ten needs to do that, number one. Number two, the Big Ten also needs to implement these rivalries that the SEC is doing here. The SEC is a smaller conference, at least for now. We'll see what happens. And they are still requiring 3. They're calling them kind of like rivals, but they don't necessarily have to be, because with the travel and everything else, USC, Oregon, Washington, and UCLA, they need to be guaranteed that they are continuing to play each other every single year to try to mitigate some of that travel. They need to have at least 4 home games, and then they need to have in the conference, and then they need to have 3 of those other ones be those be those big games, out there on the West Coast. So they're not traveling all the way over to the Maryland or something like that. So there has to be those as well, even if it's not a rivalry. They need to have 3 for every team, and even if they don't have 3, they need to have the same number for every team. Otherwise, you're going to have a team like Penn State, who, yes, they are unrivaled, but Penn State's schedule could also be in mass chaos with how much they have to travel, since they have no guarantee that they're going to play, Ohio State, Michigan, Rutgers, Maryland, whoever you want to say those 3 teams are that they need to lock in with. And then the other ones need to kind of be on a rotation. However that may work, there needs to be some kind of consistent rotation that can't be edited or anything. That has to just kind of be a consistent rotation that you go through. So that's, to me, the way the Big Ten needs to respond. They need to put their money where their mouth is. They told the SEC, this is what you need to do. The SEC did it. They amped it up even more, and now the Big Ten, at the very least, needs to go and meet the SEC where they are at.
Yeah, JR, I'm really aligned with what you said. I've been worried. So I went to Indiana when they announced that, for example, that they're dropping Virginia from, I believe it was next year's schedule. I mean, and then Cincinnati said, well, we're just taking the SEC model. I love that shot, but I didn't love dropping Virginia. My worry was we're going to lose all the tiebreakers with the committee. If we have these really weak non-conference schedules and you compare that with an SEC team, and already some people believe the SEC is deeper conference than us, and then add to it, they're playing a tough one, fairly tough, or at least a named Power 4 opponent, and we have too many Big Ten teams with 3 easy games, you're going to lose the tiebreaker. So Indiana, I want them to make the playoff again, but at 10-2, they're going to lose to every single SEC team that has, a solid schedule and a good non-conference opponent. So I completely agree with that. I didn't like where Indiana was thinking with that. To me, it's showing weakness, even though, yes, you could argue it's a good strategy to ensure you don't get a loss, but you're going to be compared to a lot of other teams with the same record, and they're going to fall back on that. What was your big wins that year? How many top 25 teams did you beat in the college football playoff committee's top 25? They don't care about the AP poll. They care about their top 25. How many teams have you beat from there? And we're going to come out on the short end of the stick and have less team in the playoffs because of that. So you're right, JR. And the other thing is, you're more battle tested by playing teams. I know you do risk injury by playing tougher teams. That is a factor for sure. I get that. And that's a real thing. But you're also more battle tested. I don't like it when a team had a bunch of easy opponents and then all of a sudden, bam, you're playing a tough school in week 4. Penn State, I don't love their non-conference schedule this year, and then bam, they're playing Oregon in week 4, and they played a bunch of powder puff teams. Now they're experienced enough, JR, where I think it will be okay, but I don't know. I mean, iron sharpens iron, and I know this from playing other sports. I'm a big tennis player. You only get better when you play people as good as you or better than you. That's when you really get better, because you're pushed to your limits. You don't get better by playing easy teams in where you're able to just physically dominate your opponent. So those are some of my thoughts there. I think the other thing, JR, this is awesome for college football, because this will hopefully promote that big issue, which we'd all love to see more Ohio State against Texas, these non-conference matchups. It doesn't have to be as big as that. I think Iowa against Iowa State is an awesome matchup. They might not always be top 25, but that's a rock fight, man. That's fun to watch in my mind, even if it's not high scoring. So great news for college football, but Big Ten needs to react.
Yeah, totally, and I understand like Iowa's situation with probably playing Iowa State every season, but I don't want every single team to get into that scenario. There's a team we can talk about that in a second, but you did bring up Indiana, and so I did want to talk about them for a second. So I have their schedule here. These are their non-conference games going from 2025 to 2032. This season, they have Old Dominion, Kennesaw State, Indiana State. That's a very weak out of conference schedule. You can say Old Dominion gave South Carolina a good game last year, but at the end of the day, that's not going to be a game that's respected. Next year, you have Colorado State, Howard, Western Kentucky. Year after that, Kennesaw State again, Indiana State again, and then UMass. And it just kind of keeps going on until 2030, where you do have the season opener at Notre Dame. I do applaud them for that. However, they did cancel the Virginia game, so I'm not even super confident that that game will happen. This decision does impact Indiana and Kirk Cinetti, although Kirk Cinetti, but he made them nervous. It is his time to respond now. Like I said, the Big Ten was puffing out their chests. They were getting ready. It's the same thing with Indiana. Now, the Indiana Hoosiers need to respond, and they need to get the schedule right for next year. They need to get Howard off that schedule most likely. Maybe Colorado State, take one of those teams off the schedule there and put on a Big 12 team, an ACC team, something like that. I don't think you're going to get Virginia on there though, because Virginia's probably got some bad blood with you not playing them when you had them scheduled before. So we'll see what happens here. But Indiana, definitely a team that is impacted by this, and they're going to need to schedule better there in the out of conference with all this going on. And at the end of the day, Indiana fans who want to say, well, what if we lose? Then it's bad. In the college football playoffs now, if the selection committee is doing things the right way, a loss to Louisville, which many were afraid of, last year, a loss to Louisville won't hurt as much. You will actually get some credit. You will get more credit. It sounds like, we'll see how it plays out, but you will get more credit by playing Louisville close than you will by beating Indiana State. And that needs to be taken into consideration. Number one, for the ability to make the playoffs. Number two, to challenge yourself against better opponents. I don't think it's a mystery that Kirk Cinetti talked about how much they learned by playing Ohio State last year. They played at Ohio State. He talked about how they didn't really have the silent count installed properly, and now they're going to make sure they have it installed better in the future. You learn that kind of stuff. Like you said, iron sharpens iron. That's the kind of stuff you want to do. And then finally, it's just better for the fans too, right? Fans want to see big games. I get it. You want more home games. I get that stuff, but you also got to just work it out with your conference schedule. How many home games are you going to have? These conference schedules come out in advance, pretty far in advance. How many home games are you going to have? How many you're not going to have? And work it out that way. So, Jeff, I did have two other teams that this kind of specifically impacts. You want me to get to those, or do you want to respond to anything I said to Indiana?
No, the only thing with Indiana is, you raised the point. Well, what if we lose? I mean, the key is being competitive, though, taking it into the fourth quarter, and you had a chance to win. Even if you didn't win, the committee will give you credit for that. Not as good if you pulled out the win, but all losses are not created the same. When Ohio State lost to Oregon by 1 point, they had a push-off controversial call against Jeremiah Smith, and then, of course, Will Howard slid 1 second too late to give them a chance to kick the game-winning field goal. That was viewed a lot different than if Ohio State would have lost by 2 touchdowns to Oregon. And in the fourth quarter, they didn't have a real chance to win. So that, just keep that in mind. I'm not saying, losing is good, but the way you lose is important. Did you look the part? Did you have a chance to win? That matters a lot.
Totally. All right, my two other teams, and Jeff, if you think of any more, let me know. But my two other teams in the Big Ten that I think this specifically impacts, number one is USC. USC has been in this fight with Notre Dame, if they're going to continue to play them or not. Really, the two big reasons before that Notre Dame wasn't going to continue to play USC, I apologize, was not going to continue to play Notre Dame was because of, number one, the travel, which is understandable. However, I do think that the Big Ten offices, like I pointed out before, with the 3 guaranteed games, stuff like that, can help mitigate those. So I think the travel is still somewhat valid, but the Big Ten offices can help them out here with that. And then number 2, the idea, and I pointed this out, that you were playing a big out of conference game that the SEC wasn't playing, and last year you played that in addition to playing LSU as well. It was too much because your conference had your schedule had so much on it, and I don't think USC, even if they got those wins, was going to get enough credit for those wins. They did beat LSU, and they did get some credit for that, but not as much as I think they probably should have throughout the entire season, especially our perception of them, because they only won one Big Ten game. But in this situation, you have the opportunity now to play 9 conference games, and you can make Notre Dame that one Power 4 team that you're playing, because the SEC said Power 4 and Notre Dame is included in that as well. That can be your team that you just kind of play every single year. Will it get annoying to play them every single year? Kinda, but guess what? It's one of the best rivalries in the sport, so it's something you need to continue to go after. And then number 2 is Michigan, who's also connected to Notre Dame, because Michigan does have that rivalry with Notre Dame. I don't think they're going to get back to playing them every single year like USC does. I think that Notre Dame would like that, but Michigan, they were not. I don't think they're going to go for that. I think they value being able to play teams in the out of conference like Oklahoma and stuff like that. But I could definitely see Michigan get back to playing them again. Maybe they have a home and home with Notre Dame, a couple home and homes with some other teams, and then go back to Notre Dame, every 5 or 6 years or something like that. And I think that would be would help. Any teams I'm missing out on here, Jeff?
No, I think you hit great points though, because without these changes, I do think USC, given how tough the Big Ten is now, really would have looked to get out of the Notre Dame game. Not because they want to, because of fear of not making the playoffs, because of losing to Notre Dame, right? I mean, like I said, if you lose close, but still having that 3 losses puts you on the brink. 4 for sure knocks you out. So I totally agree with that. The other winner here potentially, I think the right scheduling is have that one opponent that's solid. If you're a middle team, you seek a middle opponent. So we're not saying Wisconsin should be going out and scheduling LSU. Wisconsin should be scheduling South Carolina or someone like that. Mississippi State, and they've varied, but you know what I'm saying there. But if they do that, and then the other 2 are, quote, easy games, those easy games are good for college football, because that gives your MAC schools and all these other conferences money to play a home game at the bigger Power 4 school, and it helps those smaller schools keep their budgets and basically stay in business, right? And I don't think it would be good if we got down to just 4 Power 4 teams and then everyone else is completely a bunch of weaklings. So even though that's not going to allow the non-Power 4 teams to be really strong, but it'll be strong enough and maintain their viability to continue, try to win their conference, right, make a bowl game, etc. So I think this is just good for college football and for those non-Power 4 teams as well, because they're going to get still those games against the big boys and get their payday.
Totally agree. And I think if you could somehow, line this up, this is why I'm in favor of the Big Ten SEC Challenge. If you could somehow line this up so that you're playing teams with similar standings in the past seasons, or maybe a similar record the past 2 or 3 years, not only are you putting them in a situation where you're playing quality opponents, but you're also putting them in a situation where you're not, you don't have Minnesota playing Georgia or something like that, right? And I'm not saying Minnesota shouldn't play Georgia. I would love to see that game, but I'm just saying I would be much more interested in Ohio State, Georgia, or Michigan versus Alabama. I mean, we've already seen those, but you get what I'm saying. Games like that. On top of that, you could have Penn State play Tennessee. They kind of have a similar record the past 4 or 5 years. You could have Iowa play Texas. They have similar, honestly, Iowa and Texas are within 2 games of each other since 2021. I have the records pulled up here next to me. Washington and LSU have the exact same record since since 2021 together. So you could see those two teams play each other. Missouri play Minnesota. That would be a good game to play there. Try to put these matchups together in such a way that one, they work out for the teams, and then two, just designate it. If a Big Ten team only plays 4 home games, then their out of conference game against the SEC opponent would have to be, a home game for them in order to give them
I
more
love
home
this
games.
idea, more dynamic scheduling.
Mm-hmm.
And also one thing you could do, maybe this is controversial, but if an Ohio State, though, obviously getting a tougher non-conference game, so that's a little more risk, but it's going to have higher ratings than those mid games. Give those two teams more money for those games. It's going to have higher ratings. Just give them more money to assume that risk of losing, right? And getting beat, because it's more than just losing. The tougher team you play, the more physical that team, the more depth the other team has, the more likely you are to get beat up. And that can add up and accumulate over the season. So your reward for that is, your ratings are going to be higher based on past ratings. You got all that data, pay them more money.
Right, and this beats what Tony Petitti and Greg Sankey were talking about with expanding the playoffs to 24, 28, 32 teams. That's what Greg Sankey was putting out there, was 32 teams. I've not heard many people talk about that, but it should be acknowledged that all 3 of those were not good ideas and not things we want to get to. I understood some of the things they were trying to get at. They were trying to make sure they had good games being played at the end of the season, but in reality, you could just move it to the beginning of the season and have Big Ten SEC challenges, and the 2 teams in the Big Ten that are kind of at the bottom, just have those teams go out and schedule a Big 12 or an ACC team or something like that, whoever they might like. And then you don't even have to worry about saying high quality team or anything like that, because you're playing a team of similar standing to what you are. So I think that would be the best situation. We'll see if the Big Ten and the SEC can work together and get there. Don't have a whole lot of hope that it would happen, but I didn't have a whole lot of hope that the SEC was going to go to 9 conference games either, and look where we are now. So maybe the right thing in college football will just happen. Wouldn't that be a novel concept? Jeff, anything else you want to get to before we end it here?
No, I think that's a good one. And again, I do think this is good news. And I'm hoping this means let's drop this idea of expanding anything beyond 16. All along, I kind of wanted 8, 12. I'm like, all right. But all along, I've been saying if they go over 16, they've just blown it. What are we doing? So, and
Yeah.
I'm a little worried still.
Yeah. Like I said in the previous episode, I saw what they were trying to do. It's just that was not the only way to do it. There were other ways, much better ways to accomplish those things. But I am completely in favor of getting rid of the conference championship games, and doing some. I would love it if it were playing games of Big Ten versus SEC, or something like that. I don't want to see Big Ten teams go against Big Ten teams or SEC teams go against SEC teams. I think that would be much more entertaining if it was the 6 team and the Big Ten versus the 6 team in the SEC or something like that. But anyway, we'll see.
And I wouldn't mind it if we don't come to agreement SEC Big and it just stays at 12. I'm like, good, fine.
Yeah.
Keep it at 12. I'm good.
That'd be fine too. Yeah.
Yep.
Maybe they'll revert back to 8. They're not going to revert back to 8. They're never going to revert back. That's less money. So, all right. Thanks for listening, everybody. Have a good one. We'll see you next time.